the Tathagata's true meaning. All right. Um, this is what we are in the Amida Sutra. Amida Sutra is one of the important sutras of the Pure Land Buddhism. In Buddhism, there are many schools and many methods, and Pure Land is one of them. You have Zen, you have Tibetan Buddhism, so there are different methods, and Pure Land is one of them. In a nutshell, Pure Land is essentially pure mind, pure land. If your mind, your heart, your mind is pure, then your environment is pure. In other words, nobody can run inside your mind and turn it upside down unless you allow them to. So you have full control of your environment yourself. We get upset because we allow other people to upset us. In other words, there are conditions on the outside and the conditions in the inside, and the two match. That's why we get upset. If you are a very positive person, no matter where you go, no matter who you interface, you can remain your positivity. That means that that positivity is yours, as opposed to being in an environment among friendly people and you feel positive. That may not necessarily be your positivity, your own positivity, because it's somebody else making you positive. But if you are positive because it doesn't matter who you're dealing with or the situation you're in, then you know that that positivity is really yours. There are people who are not positive, they're always negative, and you try to encourage them, right? You try to be friends with them, but still they don't want to help themselves. They are not positive. Therefore, that negativity is really theirs. So same thing with positivity. So Pure Land, pure mind is on pure mind, pure land. That's the essentially it's the very top level in a nutshell of what Pure Land is. And the Pure Land is the environment. When the environment is positive, it helps us to become positive. So even though we may not have that positivity yet, but because the environment we can cultivate, we can grow our own positivity. So that's why an environment is important. And so in this sutra, the Buddha is describing this Sukhavati, which is an ultimate bliss, a land of ultimate bliss, and that exists in the West. And this is different from the heaven. It's not like some heaven out there that we want to migrate to, or it's different in a way that that land that the Buddha, out of his compassion, that he has created this land for all sentient beings, and like because he knows that being in this world is very difficult to advance spiritually. We have, we put in 8-10 hours a day to do work, right? And some people have multiple jobs just to make a living. They spend so much time and effort just to have an income and to bring food onto the table. So life is difficult. So the Buddha, Amitabha Buddha, that's his name, he has compassion for sentient beings, saying that I have created this environment, and of course, everybody is welcome to be there. It's like a place, like a university, and if you will, to progress, not a place to enjoy, but to continue to study. But the enjoyment is secondary, because when you like what you do, there's no feeling of work. When you really enjoy what you do, there's no work. And the same thing when you're in that environment, you can progress and advance very easily because it's very positive. You are surrounded by sages, by bodhisattvas, by enlightened beings who are very compassionate. Not only compassionate, but also very meritorious. And in other words, they have merits. They can say them wealthy, if you will. They have a lot of merits. They have a lot of abilities, but yet they are very compassionate. And we just in the meditation class, we learned about compassion. Compassion here is to bring out our positivity, but at the same time, we need to balance it that we are not allowing ourselves to be stepped on by other people, right? We don't want other people to take advantage of our compassion. Because that kind of compassion is not truly compassion. It's just, you're just being nice. It's not compassion. Because in compassion, there is wisdom, meaning that whether you are tough on that person or you being nice to that person, it depends on the situation. So being compassionate doesn't mean that you always have to be nice to people. It depends on what they need. If you see a child, for example, who's very arrogant, right? I can do anything. I don't need your help. With that kind of attitude, you don't want to be nice to that child because you're just encouraging his arrogance, and you're pampering his mistakes. At that point, you maybe want to be tougher even, right? To show that he's making a mistake by being a bully or by being arrogant. But as somebody who is weak, who's timid, then you don't want to be too tough because you can break him or her. So you want to be nice to her to gain that trust. And then from there, you can to guide that child or your friend. And then from there, once you know that he has gained the confidence in himself, then you can be tougher on on him or her to grow that confidence, right? So same thing, compassion in Buddhism is not a floor mat, for people to step on, but to help others. So that means that we have to feel very positive about ourselves, because if you are not positive, if you don't love yourself, how can you love others, right? So that's why in Buddhism, we practice visualizing compassion, loving kindness towards ourselves, because we want to build a strong foundation first. Then from there, we can branch out to help others. We just don't stop there when we feel happy, but we want others to be happy. We wish that others will be prosperous and happy also. And that's why in this part of the Amida Sutra, Amida, A-M-I-D-A, is an Indian word, Sanskrit word. A is like the negative of it. Mida is limited. So Mida means unlimited, right? A is not limited, so it's unlimited. Buddha represents, or Da in this case, short for Buddha, which is enlightenment. So unlimited enlightenment. This Buddha has unlimited enlightenment. So when we meditate and we breathe in, we are reminded of Ami, and then breathe out Tapa. In Chinese is Ami Tofo. So when we are breathing in and breathing out, we are reminded to be enlightened, meaning that whenever we are in a situation that we are causing rise to our emotions, negative emotions, anger, for example, we are reminded to remain enlightened and not to be fooled by the situation. And of course, in this environment, it's very difficult. That's why the Buddha has encouraged all sentient beings to migrate to that land. And that's why in this section here is about taking vow. Those who have taken vow, those who are taking vow, and those who will take vow to be reborn in the land of Amitabha, Buddha. And those persons will be non-retrogress from the supreme and perfect enlightenment. This is a very important statement right here, that those who are in that land will never fall back from the state of perfect enlightenment. In this world, sometimes we feel happy when other people are nice to us, and sometimes we feel upset when they stab our backs or whatever. And so when we have hatred, when we have anger, we are falling back from that state of positivity. We cannot maintain that state of positivity very long. And that's why we oscillate between happiness and suffering because of that. So this statement is very significant, that being in that land, we can never regress from the state of positivity. And so here the Buddha is encouraging the readers, all sentient beings, to take vow. So in other words, if you're taking vow, that means you are being receptive to the teachings. And the most fundamental state of mind of being receptive is called a beginner's mind. And that's what I want to talk to you about today, to share with you, is the importance of beginner's mind. And what is the beginner's mind? So let's take a look. Beginner's mind is a Zen term, Zen is your meditation, is a Zen term. And it is the idea or the experience that you are doing it for the first time. It's very refreshing, it's very new. And so there's a lot of curiosity, there's a lot of interest. And that's why it's called the beginner's mind. Every time that you do something for the first time, it's always very exciting, right? You look forward to it. And that is the beginner's mind. So with the beginner's mind, everything that you do, you're doing it for the first time because it's different. The situation is different. The time is different. And even the place is different. So in other words, the music that you listen to today is different from the time that maybe months ago or last week that you listened to. You enjoy it. It's different. And if you can keep that interest, people who are successful because they are convinced of, and they hold tight onto that beginner's mind, like that interest, like love at first sight, the very first love that you have, either towards a hobby or a person or whatever, but that interest, that love that you have is very intense. The first love that you have is very intense. And it can, if you can keep that love alive, then it has a lot of momentum to continue. And if you lose that love, then the relationship ends, the interest also ends, right? So that's the concept of the beginner's mind, is that whatever you love something and that's meaningful, whether it's a person, a relationship, or interest, or something that's meaningful at work, or a cause that you're pursuing. Think about what caused you to jump in the first place, right? Your interest, your curiosity, your love for it, whatever it is that caught your interest in the first place. If you can maintain that, then you can maintain progression. And how do we maintain that? By understanding that every time that we experience it, we are really experiencing it for the first time. We are not the same person that we were yesterday or the week before. And the time is different, the place is different. And so from that perspective, whatever that we are experiencing now is truly the first time. But we forget. We think it's old and boring, but it is really the first time. And that's why people can commit even their whole life to a cause, because they know it's worth it. They know it's worth the fight, because in the heart is that this burning desire. Every time they encounter it, they are putting themselves in the front line to fight for that cause. They are reminded of that first experience, the beginner's mind, right? That interest, that burning desire to get things done, to accomplish something. And that's why they can be successful, because they don't give up. They continue to hold on to that beginner's mind and keep it alive, right? That passion, to keep it alive. And that's how they can maintain and progress. The Greek philosopher Heraclitus, he said that he was best known for his theory that nothing is permanent except change. And he said that famously, no man ever steps in the same river twice, for it's not the same river and he's not the same man. Does it make sense? Right? The river is always flowing. You cannot find the same molecular water structure. You cannot seem to find the same current. Your feelings at the time is different. Your thinking is different. You have grown now, right? You have matured now. You have different perspective now. So when you experience something, you are truly experiencing it for the first time, right? And I want to correct something here to make it more consistent with Buddhism. This is on the surface, it is it seems consistent with Buddhism, but I want to make sure that it is fundamentally consistent. Whenever we see something, it should be consistent with Buddhist thinking. Otherwise, it will lead to enlightenment, because other teachings don't talk about enlightenment. And the Buddha came to this world to search for enlightenment because there was no other way to attain enlightenment. So he had to essentially develop a way to get there. So in other words, his method is different from others. And if we want to achieve enlightenment, in other words, as long as our goal is enlightenment, unlimited compassion, unlimited positivity, then we have to choose this path. If that's not your goal, then other paths are also available. But if your goal is to achieve unlimited enlightenment, wisdom, compassion, and positivity, then this is the only way that's available to the world right now, right? So I want to, although it sounds similar to Buddhism, but it's not. And I want to point out a little bit, very subtle. It's subtle, so we have to recognize this. It is not a proper conclusion to say that change is impermanent. And that's what it's suggesting, right? Nothing is impermanent except change. And so some people will conclude that change is permanent. Does it make sense so far? You following, right? But this is not proper, because the more proper way is to say that permanent, unchanging self cannot be found, therefore impermanence. So think about this. What's the difference between these two statements? It's very subtle, but we have to, and this is where people misunderstand Buddhism and they follow it the wrong way. So again, the first statement, which is improper conclusion, is to say that change is permanent. The more proper way of saying it is permanent and unchanging self cannot be found, therefore impermanence. Any idea of what's the difference between the two? It is very subtle. That's why I want to bring out this. If you can distinguish between the two, then you have a good grasp of Buddhism. Okay, the difference here is that when you say change is permanent, we still have this concept of permanence, that there is something that exists. Something is still permanent, which is change. But when Buddhism says impermanence, it means that there is nothing permanent, therefore the name impermanence. It's not that there's some fixed idea that is permanence. When we say change is permanence, that means that there is change that really exists on its own. When we say there's nothing, therefore it's permanent because of the conditions that things exist, just like anger, for example, or even happiness. We are angry because of condition. So that anger does not really exist, right? Some people agitate us. That's why we're angry. And we have our anger in us too. We want to slash out on somebody, and they're the conditions that, that victim about to get anger from us is agitating us. So therefore, he's getting, the beating, the verbal beating from us. So anger that arises in us is impermanent because it doesn't exist. But when you say that change is permanent, you're saying that there is some change, something that is permanently existing. Does it make sense? It's very subtle. Otherwise, we can become attached to language, to words. And we say, and Buddhism tries to break attachment, even linguistic attachment. And even something that's very fine, even a notion you cannot attach to, because once you become attached, you become biased, right? You think that's the best. So does it make sense so far? No. The difference between the two, that there is still a self, some unchanging self in this idea. But this statement here breaks that notion that there is something unchanging, that's something permanent. Okay, so there's a little bit of a difference there. I want to bring that out. So back to the beginner's mind. The beginner's mind is that the idea, that the feeling that you are doing it for the first time. So if you meditated, like Jose, you probably experience it. So it feels different, right? And it feels there's a possibility of growth there, probably potential. There's something more to learn. So perhaps it feels exciting and you want to experience it again. So that feeling, it's what gravitates us to want to experience it again and again, right? So you may probably remember your first experience of meditation and whatnot, or when what we did, the meditation practice that we did was called, it's called metta bhavana. It's called compassion, contemplation on compassion, or visualization of compassion. Right? So we take step by step. First, compassion towards ourselves, towards our friends and family, towards strangers, towards foes and enemies and all sentient beings. So this first experience is very strong, very fresh, just because it is the first. And it makes a tremendous impact, a deep impression on you, and perhaps so deep that you never forget it. And sometimes it's so transformational that you are changed forever, and that you're no longer the same person spiritually, maybe psychologically, emotionally. You are forever changed and you never go back. It's so powerful, emotional, that you are now like committing yourself to the cause. For example, you've seen something, injustice, and you cannot bear to see the injustice of this world, and therefore you're committing yourself to fight the injustice. So something similar to that. And every day you keep that dream alive, just like Cesar Chavez or Dr. Martin Luther King, right? They kept their dreams alive. And that's why they were able to rise above their selfishness, fear for themselves, the ego. And they're looking at the suffering, relieving the suffering of the people to them was more important than their own safety. And therefore, they could rise above their own fear. Right? Whenever that we are elevating ourselves above our own ego, our own interest, we eliminate that much fear. As long as we still have this egoistic attachment, there's always fear, right? Fear of losing something. That's why. So that's where fear comes from. So for me, just to share with you some personal experience with you. So I was born in a Buddhist family. And when I was a child, I thought that everybody should learn Buddhism because I felt delighted in learning Buddhism. So I thought people should be delighted as well by learning Buddhism. So the first sutra that I studied was they call the Earth Store Sutra, the vow of Earth Store Sutra. He made such a big vow that, until the hells are empty, he will not attain enlightenment, become a Buddha. It's playing with words, because if for somebody who is that courageous, he must be already accomplished, right? He must be there already. So of course, they called Earth Store Bodhisattva. He's really a Buddha already, but he appears to be a Bodhisattva to help others. So in this, there's one chapter in that sutra that says that if you hear the names of the Buddhas, then you are cultivating unlimited merits. And so, so I was very excited that to have learned about the names of the Buddhas. And I love my friends. I love especially my history teacher, Mr. Herrera. I can never forget him. My 10th grade in high school, Mr. Herrera. He was just a funny teacher. And the way that he taught his class was just an eye-opening. And I never saw attending class the same way. It was boring before, but the way that he taught his class and the way that he motivated his students were just so different. And so I really care for him. In my heart, as a naive, innocent student, I wanted him to have that delight in his life too. So I introduced the Buddha's name to him But of course, he was very nice and say, "Oh, he thanked me for sharing." and and I care about my friends, and so I would give up my lunch to them if they recite the Buddha's name 10 times, so that they themselves would get the benefit. So naive, innocent, or faithful, I'm not sure, but I truly I wanted them to have the same delight and same happiness. And I even wrote down like the sutras to make gifts to my friends too. So it was I was really into it. But then when I attended college, it all started to change. I stopped studying Buddhism, and with busy workload, I just completely forgot about it. And without a guru, a guide, completely Buddhism was just completely out of my mind. And I slowly to forget about Buddhism. Eventually, I stopped going to temples and practicing Buddhism and learning Buddhism. But about a decade later, after I graduated and started to develop my career, a decade later, found myself back. I found myself back, and that was because of an incident that happened with my father. He had a stroke, and we took him. We took him to Laguna Beach to see a Masters of the Pageant. I'm not sure you saw that play, but it's a play where people dressing up and posting as a painting, very famous painting. So during the play, he didn't feel well, and so he wanted to leave. And as I started to help him out, he collapsed in my hands, and that's when he has a stroke. I didn't know he has a stroke, so we called the ambulance and brought him to the hospital. So when I saw that, I began to see the fragility of life. That who could guarantee that I would not face a stroke myself? Who could guarantee that I would not encounter a disaster, right? And so I started to freak out because I saw this fragility, and especially knowing that I had no control was something that's very scary. It's something, some disasters could happen, and I have no control of diverting it. So I wanted answers. I started to look for answers. And I remember the temple that I used to go to when I was smaller. And so I visited the temple. And in the temple, I started to volunteer. I wanted to find the answers. So how could I have control of my life so that I could proceed with some security? And I found Master Ching Kong's lectures. Master Ching Kong is a very famous worldwide masters, and he has helped to establish this organization here. And so when I listened to his teachings, it was completely different. It gave me a light of hope. He talked about the Western Pure Land, that you could be hand in hand with bodhisattvas, sages, and not here, like we don't see any sages around us, but in the Western Pure Land, everybody around us are all wise, meritorious, they're all sages. So it gave me a sense of hope that I could achieve something, I could do something with a good environment. And so that from there, I started to learn, and I started to gain self-confidence, and it was something that that has helped me. Because I didn't have any guru, anybody to guide me, I lost my way. So in the past, before the pandemic, we would have students come here, we would have activities with them, we would go to like the USC Science Center, and we would have activities with them, and to build a trust, to help them guide, right, to give them advice, and they loved it. And so that kind of environment is very suitable for a person growing up to establish self-confidence. Because as you're aware, without self-confidence, you can easily succumb to peer pressure in school. If you don't know who you are, you don't know what you want, somebody is going to tell you who you are and tell you what you want, right? That's peer pressure. So later on, that's when when I began to see the fragility of life, and and I realized that living without awareness, when our karma, the fruition of our deeds, come, and if we are not prepared, we get run over by it. There is no place to hide. You can be going along, happy going, and then all of a sudden you face a disaster, and you have no time, no place to hide. You just have to endure the suffering. So that's what I did not want to encounter. I wanted to find a solution to evade, to resolve any kind of sufferings coming my way. So that was my purpose of learning Buddhism. And so that experience taught me two things. One is having a guru to study with is important. And because we can easily lose our way if we don't have the proper support in the education. And the second thing that I learned was that if we want to be successful, then we should live a meaningful life and help others. Right? We cannot just cultivate to benefit ourselves. But if we are not able to do anything big, at least we are capable of providing spiritual support, providing a friendship, right? Authentic care. And we can always help to maintain a superb environment of a spiritual community. By providing a superb environment, it means it doesn't really require much. It requires us to be true to ourselves and to practice what we learn. By doing that, we can support the environment. Those who we help, either our friends or our children, we provide them with the support, and we can provide them with the personal and professional development opportunities, guide them to pick the right career, right, and not waste their future, and help them to become contributing citizens. Right? That's the beauty of Buddhism, is that it's not something that you study and you will become isolated, or is not related to life. But Buddhism is about living a meaningful life, because if you look at the Eightfold Path, one of the elements in the Eightfold Path is right livelihood, having a meaningful career. So by having a meaningful career can lead to enlightenment. By living harmoniously, meaningfully, it is the foundation for enlightenment. Okay, so Buddhism is very realistic. So we come to Buddhism with very enthusiasm, excitement, but then after a while, what happens? For example, some people who come to the Pure Land method or meditation, after a while, they practice maybe for a few years. Most of them would say that the best experience of it was probably the first year. The first time that they encountered it, it was new, it was refreshing, it was invigorating. But then after a while, maybe after a while, the second time, the third time, they don't feel quite as fresh, and they stop appreciating it. And that's where the interest starts to dwindle. So if we're not careful, it becomes that old chanting practice, that old meditation practice, that old chanting melody, that old meditation class, and it becomes rather dull and uninteresting and even unstimulating, because we have done it so many times before and we become numb to it. That's when we have lost our beginner's mind. But we should try to think that each time we do it, that really we haven't done it before, because it's different. Right? Like I mentioned earlier, it's a different person now. We will learn something now. The situation is no longer the same. So everything that we do is really the first time. We are different. Situation is different. The time is different. So therefore, we should keep alive that experience of freshness and newness in our practice. So otherwise, the spiritual life is a bit dull and a bit stale. And then we start becoming dissatisfied. We want to look for something else. We want to look for some distractions. a bit of a zip, a bit of stimulation, something that will make life seem interesting and exciting and make something happen. But we feel when we feel dissatisfied with that Buddhist centers, that old people, same old people, same old classes, same old communal practice, becomes stale, becomes uninteresting because we have lost our beginner's mind. So we may start looking for another Buddhist center, for another spiritual practice. We think that practice doesn't seem to be giving me very much. We think in our head, and that the retreats, the meditation retreats, the Dharma classes are no longer interesting. And then we start to think that maybe I made a mistake of choosing this method, right? Or maybe it wasn't Amitabha after all. Maybe it was Medicine Buddha. Maybe it was some other Buddha. So I need to change my practice. It may be good if I had a complete change, right? So we start rationalizing, finding ways to stimulating, to reignite that passion. We always look for something that's motivating, right? Whether it's the video game, the music, or whatever, mundane or transcendental. We're always looking for something to motivate us. And if we don't have good graphs, then we're going to rationalize and to find something in substitute to reignite that passion. So it is very important that we maintain that beginner's mind, that fresh approach, as though everything was happening for the first time. And the truth is, everything is for the first time if we think about it. I remember when I came here, just to share a little bit more of experience with you, when I came to the Amida Society, that was about 15 years ago. It was like an adventure to me because I had heard so much about Amida Society around the world from Master Chin Kong's lectures. I knew of Amida societies in Taiwan, in Australia, in Texas, but I didn't really know that there was one here in the San Gabriel Valley. And when I was volunteering for at the temple, I found this book, and in the back of the book, there was a list of addresses, and one of the addresses was this Amida Society in Temple City. So I was so excited. It was local to me. So I called him up, and I remember it was Sister Zhiling. She answered. She's no longer here with us. She passed away probably 10 years ago. And she answered, and she said, there's no activities until Saturday. And I was disappointed because I had to wait until Saturday to participate. But when Saturday came, I was more delighted when I realized that the service did not disappoint me. It was a beautiful melody. The atmosphere of the communal practice was just beautiful. It was pure magic, right? It was all in Chinese. I didn't know Chinese at the time, but I was resonating with the music, the melody, the tones, the beat. Even though it was in Chinese, I didn't care. So I was very excited, and it felt magical and inspirational. And I felt this inspiration not only in my head, but I could feel it in my body. I'm not sure you've ever experienced that, but you can feel this like a current of inspiration running from head to toe. It wasn't my imagination, but I was able to feel it physically. It was powerful and wonderful. Powerful because it allowed me to find a confidence in myself. And it was wonderful because I felt like everything around me disappeared. And I felt like I was in my own world, swimming in the compassionate aura of the Buddha. And that was about 15 years ago. And it still feels powerful and wonderful now, today. Every week, Saturday, we come here, we have communal practice, meditation, chanting session. I look forward to every week because it feels wonderful. And I'm grateful for it because I have a lot of respect for it. I have a lot of respect for the melody. I have a lot of respect for the instrument, the tone and everything about it. That I have a lot of respect for it. I'm grateful for it. Maybe that's a source of the joy that I feel for it. And so because of that, I made it a priority for me. Right, every Saturday for the last almost 15 years, every Saturday, I never miss a beat, and it gained momentum. And you want to turn it into a habit. It makes it easier to progress when it becomes a habit because you don't have to work for it anymore. You don't have to think about it anymore. It just becomes natural. And that's where it helps to continue to do it every day or on a regular basis to build that momentum. Then you don't have to spend so much time making it work. So that was my personal experience with my beginner's mind, and I still remember, and I'm so grateful that it's the music that drew me in the first place, and it's still the music that draws me in today. And so music is very inspirational. If you love music, you know how it is, and you have this resonance for it, and that resonance you continue to build up resonance, right? It continues to grow and grow as long as you don't stop growing. As long as you don't stop losing that interest, it continues to grow and grow, right? So I'm sure you can find some, you can reflect in your life. You find something that you had you've found meaningful in the first place, and perhaps it's still resonating in your heart. And the reason that's still resonating in your heart because you are keeping that beginner's mind alive. So every time it's a new experience, right? No longer that old same Saturday sessions, old times, old Buddhist center, or lectures, tiresome points again and again, but everything is new. You never heard it before, and it's fresh in your mind, and you appreciate it, and you rejoice in your own practice. Right? You rejoice in the fact that you have the opportunity to practice the Pure Land method or meditation, the precious opportunity to be forever liberated from all kinds of dissatisfactions and suffering in this lifetime, right? So you appreciate the opportunity to enjoy the spiritual friendship, right? So it helps to build this rhythm of spiritual life because it builds momentum. Just like the snowball effect, right? You have a tiny little snowball, but it rolls downhill and it gains momentum and accumulates snow and becomes very powerful to a point where nothing can stop you. Your passion, your momentum is so powerful that nobody can stop you on the track. That's how important the beginner's mind is. So develop that rhythm in a spiritual life. If every week doesn't work for you, every month, but you keep on a regular basis, right? And some people can do that. Some people would spend 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, whatever rhythm that works for you. The important point here is to maintain that regularity so that it continues to build momentum. So then one important thing that we should realize is that we are all quite free to do whatever that we want, whether it's frequency of 1 week, or daily, or 1 month, or whatever, or whatever method, 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. We are quite free to choose that rhythm. Very often we don't realize this, but it is possible to continue. We often disguise that won't as a can't to give ourselves a way out. I can't do it, I'm so busy. Right? And we would rationalize and give ourselves a way out like that. So to let ourselves off the hook, so to speak, right? But there's usually quite a lot that we can do if we only recognize the fact and really want to do it, right? We have to overcome that that disguise that we usually put in front of us, right? Once you have gained momentum, that's not the end, because cultivation begins to bite. That's when the real challenge occurs. This is where the next obstacle we should pay attention to, because it could really obstruct us, and just like a wave crashing onto your little boat, you have overcome the waves at the shore. You think it's all smooth sailing, but the next thing you knew, the tsunami comes and wipe out your little boat, and that's what most people will encounter. So the initial obstruction is not easy to overcome, but the next is very difficult to overcome. And what is that? So this is what's usually what happens. So when we start to practice, at the initial period, it's very smooth, very successful, and everything that we do is very successful. So we come to like a meditation class, and everything goes quite well, and we're making progress. But then after 4 months or 6 months or years, and some people even 5 years, this obstruction doesn't surface until decades later. So that's how scary it is. It depends on how deep you want to dig. But for some people, it can happen a few months, few years, or a few decades. And then all of a sudden, things seems to go wrong, right? They can't meditate anymore. They have a lot of disturbing thoughts, and they become agitated. They cannot sit very well, and they become quite upset. There may be life events that start to take toll on the practice, right? Maybe work, family start to tear them emotionally or spiritually apart, and they feel like there's a lot of burden. They start to feel overwhelmed. They start to feel like they're losing control, and that's where things happen. That's where our cultivation begins to bite. So meditation is beginning to produce effects, right? We aren't just going to this meditation class, happy-go-lucky, and then we return to our normal activities as if it's just a hobby. Because our practice at this point is no longer a hobby. It's beginning to take serious effect, and it's no longer just at at the surface of the mind, if you will, but it starts to percolate through something that's beginning to sink into our subconsciousness, and it will have this upheaval effect of us, and for this during this whole time, it will start to disturb us. But usually, if we stick with it and persist and don't force things too much, but continue with the rhythm, knowing that we are facing obstructions, after a while, we usually reestablish our meditation. We recover. So this is very important to know. If we don't understand this, we don't know what we're going through, we can give up because we think that this is the end of our practice and it's not worth pursuing, right? And in some cases, on a better and more positive level, when we recover, once you overcome that, you become better. You learned and you survive, and you become even more positive. And you may have also sorted a few personal problems out as well, resolve things, problems at work, problems with family. You'll be resolved. You're now on, good terms, for example, at work or with family and so forth. So you have resolved not only your own personal problems, but maybe problems with others as well, right? So you now, in other words, you're on better ground than before. So there can be a bigger and sometimes even more dramatic upheaval after a couple of years or even a decade. And quite often, people stop meditating at that point. They stop practicing. That seems to be a quite critical period. So this is something that we should pay attention to our own progress and realize that we're going through a challenge and that we should not give up, because once we have overcome that, we know that we will be on better grounds, right? So if you can get through that, you're probably in it for good, because once you have experienced that, you know how it is. You know that challenges can no longer fool you. Then from that point, it's 20/20 hindsight. You know how it is, so you can continue forward. So then you're probably going to be in it for good. Sometimes your meditation is going quite well. You're experiencing positively. And then for some reasons, you don't want to continue. So at this point, you just need to gently persist and don't give up. Maybe continue, instead of, let's say you meditate for like what we did for half an hour, or even if you can't come here, but if you can just, can't come here at the beginning of the sessions, but if you can just put in the effort to at least make the effort to come here, for example, then you have overcome that resistance, that obstructions, right? So you are building the momentum. You are no longer accepting defeat. You're telling yourself, no, I'm going to make my own decision to be where I want to be, and not of my emotional holdback or whatever baggage that is taking me back. But I've decided to make a decision to move on, right? That's what you're telling yourself every time you overcome obstructions. But if you feel like you're losing interest and without any motivation to continue, then you should go back to do what you enjoyed before. Perhaps go to listen to your favorite music or eat your favorite food, something that will reignite that passion, right? That interest again, that motivation. So you go back to that. I mean, this may be worldly attachment, but there is a difference this time. Because before we study Buddhism, we enjoy those things because of delusion to satisfy our cravings. But now, after we have studied Buddhism, we are enjoying those things to give us energy, if you will, to reignite that passion, right? To give us that motivation to continue the journey. So we know that we may be still be weak, and we cannot leave the worldly enjoyments behind yet. But then you do something that will allow you to overcome the obstructions. Like, for example, music. You can listen to music without lyrics that stir your negative emotions, for example. But just listen to the beat, listen to the melody. It gives you that excitement again. Fighting our cravings is not easy, and it can be very tiring, spiritually and physically. That's why there's reaction. And the practitioner could become annoyed by the fight. So why is there such reaction? What is happening? Well, there are two reasons. One reason is that the whole system, our whole being, is beginning to feel threatened. We've been chugging along in life all this time, decades, and now certainly we want to change course. Of course, it's going to resist, right? Our subconsciousness that we've been building is going to resist that change. His whole being, as it were, is beginning to think, oh my God, he's taking it this seriously. He's not no longer attending meditation classes just to feel positive, but he's taking this seriously. He wants to be transcendental. He wants to be enlightened. So that's what our whole being is taking resistance. So it's no longer just a pleasant and comfortable sit where you float along quite happily and then go back to your pig trough, as it were. But it's beginning to bite. It's beginning to take hold, and you're beginning to be changed. That's what's happening. So of course, there's a sharp reaction from that part of you, which is not yet involved, and that's what's reacting. It's reacting to that change. This has happened not only today, but it has always been the case. Every time you want to make a change spiritually, you want to break that ground, you want to expand that circle, you are fighting that resistance. And this also happened back during Buddha's day too. I'll give you a story about Kisa Katami. I shared this story with you before. Kisa Katami was a woman who, during Buddha's day, she lost her child, and she was crazed with grief. She wanted her child to be alive again. So she would ask everybody that she saw, can you please help my child? Can you please revive my child? Can you help him to become alive again? Everybody she saw she was going through this grief. And then somebody was compassionate enough to introduce her to the Buddha to help, because the Buddhas help people. So she came to the Buddha and said, please help my child, help him to become alive again. And for those who are not familiar with this story, I'll just give you a brief account on it. So the Buddha didn't give her any teaching. He said, fine, I will make your child alive again under one condition. If you can bring back to me a mustard seed from a family who has never experienced death, then I will save your child. She was so excited, she forgot, she didn't hear the last part, that she had to bring back. She only heard about bringing back a mustard seed. Mustard seeds were widely available, right? Any household would have mustard seeds. But she didn't hear the part that it would have to come from a house that has never experienced death. So she went on and she asked for mustard seed. Can I please have mustard seed to save my child? And one householder would say, yes, I can give it to you. But then she remembered the last part and she asked, is this a house that has never experienced death? Say, no, I'm sorry, my brother just passed away. And she went to the next house, the same thing. My mother just passed away, my aunt, my uncle. And then she was exhausted, asking for mustard seed. She came back to the Buddhas and said, Lord, I cannot find a mustard seed from a household that has not experienced death. And then at that point, she came to realizations that death comes to all. And she accepts that. And I have a little short video to explain the meaning behind that. It's not just accepting death, but it's a deeper meaning behind it. But due to the lack of time, I won't elaborate on it. But the point here is that she was facing a lot of suffering going through this ordeal. But then later, she realized the truth. She became enlightened, and she asked the Buddha to ordain her to be a nun. So she's now part of the Sangha. So she's a nun now. So during her practice, every day she would go out into the city for alms, to ask for food, right? And then when she walked out to the city and gathered her food, collected her food, she sat down at the foot of a tree for the day's abiding to partake, to eat her meal. And then Mara, you could say Mara, the evil one. Mara, a little bit history on the Mara, was the one who obstructed the Buddha to attain enlightenment. And the reason was because we belong to Mara's realm. And if you are liberated, you are outside of Mara's control. And Mara does not like that. And so he's always testing and obstructing those who want to be liberated. But of course, Mara, not only he's actually a deity in heaven, but it's very controlling. But Mara in Buddhism is also used to represent anything that can obstruct you. So in this case, Kisa Katami heard some voices in her head, and the voice wanted to arouse fear, trepidations, and terror in her mind to make her fall away from concentration, from her meditation, to break her down. Essentially, Mara wants to break her down because she was practicing and beginning to be liberated. And then in her mind, she was hearing the voices, and it says, why now, when your son is dead, do you sit alone with tearful face? Having entered the woods all alone, are you on the lookout for a man? So in this case, Mara was not tempting her with alcohol or gambling or food, but he was tormenting her with her fears and cravings deep inside. So she has lost her son. So there's fear of loneliness, right? So so Mara knows that there's deep inside fears and cravings that have not been resolved, and therefore he's going to uncover them to produce effect on her to break her down so that she could fall away from concentration. So this is where cultivation begins to bite here, is that our fears, our craving deep inside we're beginning to uncover them, if you will. And so they're starting to surface. And that's why we feel this resistance. But for her, her biggest fears and cravings were deep in her heart, right? Fear of loneliness and craving for a warm family, perhaps, because she's now all alone. She lost her family, lost her child. She's now all alone. And so it's understandable, conceivable that she was going through a period of fear of loneliness, right? And this craving for a warm family. How did she develop those fears and cravings deep in her? Well, she must have kept thinking about those things, right? After she lost her child, she must have continued to think about those things, and those things seeped into her subconsciousness, and they became her biggest concerns. But why? Why were they her biggest concerns? Any idea? Well, you can say, those concerns were her fundamental questions, if you will, of her livelihood, right? They were the questions of life and death. Because for her, without her family, she would die. She felt like she could die of loneliness. And so when things that we face and they impact our livelihood, we start to ask questions. What can we do? That's when we start to take it seriously, right? So whatever that we could not resolve would become our fear. Whatever that we could not possess or to have would become our craving. So deep down in our hearts, those things that we have collected over the years of our lives, they have been buried deep down in the subconsciousness. And now we're trying to clean ourselves, right? We're trying to drain the swamp, if you will. And we start to find there's a lot of ugliness underneath that swamp. And it's foul smell. It doesn't look pretty at all. But that's our reality. And some people are fearful of facing that reality. They don't want to face it. And so they continue to pile on. In other words, they continue to ignore the problems. But eventually, sooner or later, we have to deal with them. And that's what obstruction is, that people bounce back. They give up. They fall back. They can never pass that gate because they're not willing to face reality. So when we study practice meditation, when we practice meditation, we cultivate positivity. We are arming ourselves to prepare for such reality. When we have so much positivity in us, any negativity, any ugliness that we may have buried deep down in the subconsciousness will not be able to affect us. Does it make sense? When you have so much momentum rolling downhill, there's nothing that's going to stand in its way, right? It's going to get run over. So that's how we want to be. We want to develop so much momentum of positivity that anything that we may have done in the past, we may have regrets, but those regrets don't matter to us. We can resolve those regrets, right? And that's what Kisa Katami was facing. And she realized that it was Mara who was arousing fear and desire and trepidation and terror in her. And he wanted to make her fall away from concentration of meditation. And when she understood that, she replied to him, "I've gotten past the death of sons. With this, the search for man has ended. I do not sorrow, I do not weep, nor do I fear you, friend." So she did not see Mara as enemy anymore, but a friend who has helped her to overcome her fear. Because the worst thing I think that you can do to a friend when a friend is in this situation of loneliness and say, "Oh yeah, it's okay," just you continue to be sympathetic and you pile onto that, and you remind that person of that person's weakness, the person's sorrow. That's terrible. But if you're a true friend, you will do something to increase that friend's confidence, right? So in this case, he was very strong, even though Mara came to agitate her, to instill fear or try to instill fear in her. He was not successful because she was not delusion, right? She had this enlightenment in her to recognize that she was being tricked, right? So the light everywhere has been destroyed. The mass of darkness has been sundered. Having conquered the army of death, I dwell without defiling tanks. And after Bhikkhuni Isagatami says this, Mara, the evil one, knows that she has recognized her, and he was sad, disappointed, and disappeared. So that's what happened is once we face our own reality, everything is now hindsight 2020. Right? We will say that it's not that bad. Right? You look through all the challenges you've been through. At the time of the challenge, it was terrible, fearful. But once you overcome it, now you look back, you can laugh at it because it's not as fearful as you thought. So that's the progress that we should be aware of when we practice meditation, because this is serious business. So fears and desires that we have deep in our hearts, if we don't resolve them, they will surface. So that's one factor why cultivation begins to bite. The second factor is that meditation puts you in contact very often with feelings that which are there, but you haven't allowed yourself to experience. For example, you come to a meditation retreat and you try to finish work. So you're burning midnight oil to trying to finish work. You feel tired, but you're not allowing yourself to feel tired. So you continue to work. And when you come to meditation and you sit in meditation, you feel relaxed. And then you feel tired. You fall asleep. It's not meditation that makes you sleepy, but it's the tiredness that you have hidden away is now coming to surface. Right? So when you have the opportunity to relax in meditation, you start coming into contact with that tiredness. So you mustn't think that meditation is what has made you tired. Does it make sense? So we have to be aware of what's hidden. When we ignore something, we are sweeping under the rug. It's the rug of a subconsciousness that we don't want to see, but it's still there. Or for example, in the middle of meditation retreat, your family calls you and tells you have to leave the retreat to buy something or to handle some situation, and then you get angry. Meditation is supposed to be positive, but anger is not positive. So the source of anger is not because you are part of meditation, you're in meditation, but the source of anger has always been there. Now it's beginning to surface. That anger is beginning to surface, right? So the same thing with resentment. So it's always been there. So it's important that we know where it's coming from and what has caused it, right? So we shouldn't say it's our practice that has made us this way. When we come on retreat, especially when we come from a more or less normal life, we often come in a very battered state psychologically, and we may have to experience that for a while. Everybody in this civilization is battered. You're being battered day and night, left and right. You go to work, you're battered. You go home, you're battered there as well. Civilized man is a battered man, right? But you may only realize this when you come on a retreat or start trying to meditate. because you are now coming in contact with your subconsciousness. So same thing with when we chant Amitabha name or when we meditate, it seems to have a lot of false and wandering thoughts, but it's not due to our practice, but because those thoughts have always been there. We just haven't been paying attention to them. So it's important that we don't give up, but we know that once you overcome that, it's better. You will be on better grounds. And so it's important that we try to reach the point. We try to push ourselves, and then you can crawl back, and that's okay. Because the more times that you reach that point on the brink, and then where you cannot handle anymore and you fall back, every time you do that, you gain some experience, you gain some momentum. And your subconsciousness will be familiar with it. The reason that it's resisting is because it's facing change that it's not familiar with. It's in a strange territory, unfamiliar territory. That's why it's resisting. So every time we push ourselves to that brink and then let go again, we are familiarizing ourselves of that situation, of that experience. And your consciousness will begin to recognize it, that it's not foreign. It's now part of you, right? Anyone who has tried to live a spiritual life knows how difficult it is to make even a little progress. Our progress on the path is measured by inches, but too easy to slip by yards. Right? We take one step forward, 3 steps backwards. And so it's important that we get to this crucial point of irreversibility. This is a very important point in our practice, meditation practice. As in the Dhammapada text that the Buddha says, that enlightened one whose victory is irreversible and whose fears endless, by what track will you lead him astray, the trackless ones? In other words, once we reach this level of irreversibility, there's no falling back, meaning we won't go back to how we were before. Our positivity will continue to increase. It will not diminish. That's important. So what does this mean? In Buddhist traditions, our mundane existence naturally consists in actions and reaction between opposite factors. There's pleasure, pain, you're happy, after you've been happy, you're satisfied, you become agitated again, right? The video that we see, YouTube video we enjoy so much, or the music that we enjoy so much, at the beginning it's very pleasurable, but then after a while we get tired of it. So the oscillation, if you watch yourself carefully, you will know the oscillation of your emotions up and down, up and down. So that's what we're facing. But that's one part. Once you have reached the irreversibility, then it's become spiral. In other words, once you become a Buddha, it doesn't mean you just become a statue, like up there and you just sit there. But you begin to grow, spiral. You continue to grow. So we want to be on the path of the spiral growth, not cyclical growth. Cyclical growth is, up and down, happy, sad, happy, sad, happy, sad. So the crucial point is that state of irreversibility. It's called entering the streams. And that is the real object of the spiritual life, is to not fall back ever again. That is very important. But until then, until we pass through the gate of irreversibility, we are in a precarious position. Right? We will be subject to falling if we have not reached this point of irreversibility. We shouldn't feel despair, because progressing and regressing is normal. It's normal for us to progress and then regress, because we're still subject to the gravitational pull of the conditioned. The conditions are the worldly things, just simply put. And that's why in Sukhavati, the Western Pure Land is essential for our achievement, because it provides irreversible conditions and environments. We don't need to put so much effort, but we will not become irreversible. and we no longer have the negative conditions to make us reverse, right? So every step that we take will only make progress towards enlightenment. That's why the Buddha, in his last words, he said, with mindfulness, strive. That was his encouragement to the monks and nuns when before he left this world. So we make the best effort we can, and we can try to make the best effort we can, but we are not in a favorable condition. We can be wasting our efforts, right? If you want to practice meditation, but then this sound all over, like cars beeping, people yelling, very distracting, it won't help. You could be wasting your efforts, right? But at the same time, if you're in a positive environment, you're in this positive environment, but you don't want to come here or you don't want to practice, then you're not making progress either. So we need both. That's why Sukhavati, the pure Western Pure Land, is necessary for our practice. Without it, it's very difficult to make progress and to get to the point of irreversibility. Once you have enough momentum, there is nothing that can obstruct you. Master Yingguang in China, he once says that even 1,000 oxen cannot pull me back. So nothing can obstruct him. He was so completely self-confident. He knew what he was dealing with. And so there was nothing that could pull him back. And that was because he did not lose sight of his objective. And so it is important for us to not lose sight of that objective in order to keep our beginner's mind alive, right? We must willing and want to go deeper. And we must want to go deeper, and we must avoid hindrances and distractions. We must devote sufficient amount of time to meditation. In other words, you have to really put into practice. You can't just listen one ear and out the other. You have to take it to heart and willing to practice, right? And recognize that once we reach a certain point, there will be a lot of resistance coming from deep down within us, right? There will be something deep down within us that will want to resist, sometimes very strongly. But we must be on the alert. We must not be distracted. But we shouldn't give up, because there's help, motivation for our practice, for meditation. There is motivation is an important factor, and there are two types of motivation. One is psychological, the other one is spiritual. Psychological motivation for meditation is a search for peace of mind, right? Why do we want to practice meditation? Well, because it's peaceful, it's wonderful, we feel positive. So there's a motivation there for us. There's a carrot in front of us that we want to have, and so we'll keep pursuing. And for the Pure Land method, the motivation is that that is the only method that can lead one out of the cycle of life and death in this lifetime. No more suffering whatsoever. Because once you get to migrate to the Western Pure Land, there is no reversibility. And so you continue to progress. And so that's one, is that psychologically, there's tranquility, there's peace of mind that is very motivating for us to pursue. The other is the spiritual motivation, which is taking one step further. For spiritual motivation, there is a desire or aspiration for enlightenment. So in wider terms, it encompasses the desire to understand the meaning of existence itself, right? To penetrate the ultimate nature of things. So, and even in the wider terms, we want to have this meaningful life, and one that can help others. That's a meaningful life, where you can help others. And achieving Buddhahood will allow us to eliminate all sufferings for ourselves and others. So that's the highest meaning, is to achieve Buddhahood, so that we have this ability, unlimited compassion, unlimited merits, unlimited virtues, unlimited wisdom to help all sentient beings. And that is why we want to attain enlightenment, Buddhahood, is that we want to uncover our unlimited abilities to help others. And that's the most meaningful way of living a life, right? But the two are not mutually exclusive. They are related. Because when you feel happy about meditating, you have this inspiration for something higher, for something more meaningful. This is important here because this gets to will help us to overcome the oscillation that we have, the progressing and the regressing that we are facing. And that is because of the gravitational pull. The Buddha described the path to enlightenment in terms of 3 stages: ethics, or morality, meditations, and wisdom. So that's the traditional path. In other words, if you want to have wisdom, your mind has to be meditative. Because when you become meditative, it allows you to see things very clearly. You're not distracted. You're not being biased. You're not being biased culturally, linguistically, personally, or peer pressure. But you see things very clearly, and you have that confidence in you to see things very clearly. That's wisdom, right? But what allows you to see things clearly is that you have no regrets in whatsoever in what you do, right? So in other words, to become a responsible, ethical person. It's like your blank sheet of paper. When it's all messy, it's dirty, any little bit of a black ink smear, you won't see as much. Meaning that when our minds are defiled with a lot of afflictions, anger, negativity, any more negativity is not going to agitate us. But if we want to take it seriously and want to drain the swamp and clean that, have a clean sheet of paper, in other words, when you meditate and you concentrate, you magnify everything that's inside you. Any negative emotions that you have inside you will be magnified. You will feel really horrible. So that's why it's important that when we practice meditation, that we live a moral life. Knowing that we have done nothing wrong is very powerful. But if in meditation, if all you concentrate on is all the negative things that you have done, then it's just going to make you feel horrible, right? So that's why this path, morality, meditation, and wisdom, is the traditional path, and one leads to the other. You being a moral person, you know you have done nothing wrong. It allows you to be relaxed, right? To be at ease with yourself because you have no regrets, no remorse. When your mind's at ease, your body is at ease, you can now think clearly, see things clearly, and that's wisdom, right? And so you can see this cycle. And then you will do even more moral things. You will help people. And that will even refine your meditation, and then it will increase your wisdom and so forth. So you can see this virtuous cycle. But the gravitational pull is that nothing goes smoothly. Sometimes you're at the heights of meditation, and sometimes you're at the depths of the worldliness, where you get wrapped up into this worldly interest, like mindless scrolling through YouTube videos, and you can never get away from it, right? So that's the depths of the worldliness. But so you oscillate between the two. And so that is the pull of the conditioned. So then what happens? You're oscillating between the heights and the depths. But then we're not doomed to this cycle forever, though. Not necessarily. So we should understand that when we practice and we haven't gotten to that state of irreversibility, we will always be under its influence. So we shouldn't be surprised that we are falling because we haven't gotten there yet, and that's okay. As long as we don't give up, as long as we haven't forgotten the beginner's mind, there is always an opportunity to recover, right? So after we recover, then what happens? Then we face the pull of the unconditioned. Now this starting to pull us towards transcendental. we still to feel like we're being carried away by the stream, and we're experiencing something that we don't know before, and this can be very scary for some people because it's starting to pull us. We're starting to lose our ego. We're starting to being pulled by something towards somewhere that we are not familiar with. And that's where the resistance is of ourselves. That's the pull of the unconditioned, right? And we start feeling this pull. When we start feeling ourselves going, slipping, sliding, being carried away, we usually resist. We usually pull back. This is because we feel afraid. We say, oh yes, we want to achieve enlightenment. We want nirvana. But then when it really comes to that point, we don't want to be carried away. We don't want to lose ourselves. So that's when we pull back, because we're being pulled in the directions of unfamiliar territory. This state of egolessness is unknown to us. But this is in fact just what you must learn to do, is to let go. Just let go. This is the most difficult thing in the world, just to let go. Let go of ourselves. But we should understand this a little bit deeper. It's not just to let go of everything, but to let go of egoism that promotes bias, prejudice, and aggression. And to let go of fears that imprison us within the cycle of life and death, suffering that we cannot get away, and to let go of irresponsibility that shows no caring, no loving kindness to others, right? And to let go of false view that leads to attachment to nihilism or existentialism. Nihilism is, after this life, there's no life. Or existentialism is like you live forever, right? Both those are two extreme views in Buddhist perspective. So we have to give up, if you like, not in the ordinary everyday sense of the expression, but in a more spiritual sense. To use more religious terminology, we just have to surrender to the unconditioned, right? Again, surrender all the negativity, not the positivity. So let me summarize here. The beginner's mind is very strong, something that you feel very fresh just because it's the first, and it has made a tremendous impact on you, and you want to experience it one more time. So it's important to maintain that beginner's mind, because that's the source of motivation for us to want to continue, right? And the different levels of positivity and motivation, they're psychological, where we practice because it's beneficial to our life, but we should go beyond that, and that is transcendental. That gives you insight into reality, because until you see things clearly, you won't change. So we want to get to a point where we see things clearly and we are transformed permanently, right? But then once we go through that process, we should understand that there is gravitational pull of the conditions. There are obstructions that will hold us back, and we need to overcome the obstructions. We need to understand that those obstructions are not real, that they are something that can be resolved. It's just that we are encountering the reality that we have buried, the ugly reality that we have buried for a long time in our subconsciousness. And we have to break through that the ugly reality in order to see this beautiful daylight. Does that make sense? Okay, so we just have to let go and surrender to the unconditioned, right? To let go of all the negativity, let go of all the egoism that does not bring joy to ourselves or other people. Any comments before we end? All right. Okay, let's do merit dedication. Merit dedication here is that whatever we want to share, what we have gained with all sentient beings. This is the the spirit of Buddhism is to share what we have with all others. So you could please join your palms together. We recite. May the merits and virtues accrue today adorn the Buddha Pure Lands, repay 4 types of kindness above, and aid those suffering in the path below. May those who see and hear of this bring forth the resolve for the Bodhi mind. When this retribution body is complete, together we shall meet in the land of ultimate bliss. If you could please rise, we bow to the Buddha 3 times to show our respect. First bow. Second bow. Third bow. 阿弥陀佛。